Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: teacher refuses to teach all males in the class. I send recording and letter to Department of Education. The second story: boss tried to accuse me of theft, dug a hole for himself and is now suspended. The third story: colleague constantly made me remarks, so I sent all her ridicule to the manager. The first story is: refused to teach all males in the class? We'll see what the Department of Education has to say about it. Back in 2008, I was in year 11, Australian, second last year of high school. My high school had a reputation for being abysmal, and faculty would more often than not brush aside any problems students were facing. Enter the crazy teacher, from now on referred to as CT. CT taught a multimedia class I was enrolled in, and this was the first year they had done this class, as it was a TAFE equivalency course they were trialing. Sort of like a community college course you could take during high school, earning a certificate at the end. These courses are not graded, but pass or fail. CT started off fine for a few weeks, then the rants started. They would last the full hour of the class as she yelled and yelled about almost anything. Our perceived laziness, our idiocy, the powerlessness of the principal to do anything. This obviously severely impacted our work, as we couldn't focus while CT was screaming at the top of her lungs. Several students voiced concerns to deputies, the principal, student services, etc., all to no avail. One day, CT announced that because the male students were taking up all her time with questions, she would no longer be teaching us, instead only focusing on the female students. This was an elective course, and there were 2 out of 3 male students to 1 out of 3 female students in the class. At first, I thought CT was joking, but it became abundantly clear that they were seriously not going to teach 2 out of 3 of the class, while ranting and raving every time we had them. Eventually, I'd had enough. I recorded one of her hour-long rants in its entirety on my old Nokia slide phone. I vividly remember that in it, CT said that the principal has no power in this classroom. God himself could come down from heaven and he wouldn't be able to stop me. Bingo! The next day, I took this to the principal and demanded a meeting with them and the vice deputy. I showed them the recording, albeit a mere snippet of the 60 minutes. After a moment, the principal asked if I knew that I could be suspended for using my phone in class and recording someone without their permission. I was told to delete the recording on my phone immediately or face disciplinary action. I deleted the recording as asked, and the principal and deputy thought that would be the end of it, but oh boy were they wrong. While I'd never been one to stick up for myself, I decided it was now or never. I told the principal that I was disgusted by the audacity they displayed to threaten me with disciplinary action over showing them proof that there was a problem with CT. I told them truthfully that I had made copies of the recording and would release them to every major news and radio station unless something was done about this situation. They didn't believe me and again threatened me with suspension. At that moment I realized what I had to do, so I pretended to drop it and claimed that I would continue my classes without complaint. That night I wrote a very detailed letter to the Department of Education, wherein I recounted as much as I could remember about CT and their ridiculous rants. I explained the lengths I had gone to have this resolved within the school, and the response I was met with. I put the copy of the recording onto a thumb drive with the letter and sent it to the DOE. Weeks went by without a response, and with everything I was dealing with at school, I'd almost forgotten about it. CT would not show up for some classes. Sometimes CT would kick us out for no reason, and then scream at us for leaving. It was a nightmare. 3 weeks later, I received a response from the Department of Education. In the letter, they apologized for the mistreatment I had suffered at the hands of teacher and principal alike, and explained that they would be conducting an audit of the entire school. Literally every single staff member there would be audited with no stone left unturned. They thanked me for bringing this to their attention, and assured me that no disciplinary action would be taken against me for recording the rant that I had supplied them with. Soon the entire school found out what I had done. Most of the teachers absolutely loathed me after that point, one going so far as to say that you should have kept your mouth shut and your head down. I guess the audit was seen as an inconvenience to them, but what is a small inconvenience against the education and possible graduation of around 15 kids? We just wanted to learn and were discriminated against for no reason, with no help offered from within the school. Even some of the students in that class with me thought I'd gone too far, but I couldn't care less about their opinions. I knew what I did was right. Eventually, CT left on her own accord, literally stomping out of class and driving away mid-lesson, never to be seen again. I heard she got a really nice job at a private school not far away, so I guess she got lucky. I graduated the next year, with the principal remarking, as she handed over my certificate during the graduation ceremony, "I can't believe you made it." Not in an encouraging good for you way, mind you, but in an I tried so hard to stop this from happening kind of way. This was 10 years ago and it still boils my blood thinking about it, but I learned a valuable lesson. If you can't fight the system, make the system work in your favor. I hope this encourages any students who are facing similar issues to speak up and demand that they receive the education they deserve. The next story is, seen a few of these bad boss stories. Like most, I have my own. So this story involves a few characters. A hat manager, D, assistant manager, C, store boss, S, regional head, M. I worked for a company very recently that were the UK's largest mobile and electronics retailer. I live in a small town and for quite a while was working in a branch around 1 hour's travel away from home. This changed back in March when my local store was getting a refurbishment and needed additional staff. I jumped at the chance to cut 2 hours travel and the cost of that out of my day. Things like they often do started great. The store being reopened had a lot of hype for the first month, and business was great. 2 months in, my boss D tells me C has handed in her notice, and would I like the job? I snap his hand off, needing the extra hours and money. The only problem is C decided she wasn't going to ask for her letter of resignation back, and my promotion is I guess off the table. Which sucks, but it is what it is. Chalk it up as a loss and move on. A good friend of mine is at uni and has a break, so I decide to spend a weekend in Switzerland visiting, and when I come back the atmosphere has changed in the store. A month after I'm brought into the manager's office by D and S, D starts quizzing me on our procedures, while S takes notes. I'm accused in this meeting of stealing phones and cash by D. He asks me where they went, refuses to show me evidence, after I ask to see, and suspends me from the store while he investigates. Now, I know I haven't taken anything, but I have the script from the meeting, and all the time in the world to figure this out. I was given 2 dates on which I was told I had been seen taking photos and money. I checked my work schedule and I wasn't in store. I checked my phone's pictures to figure out what I was doing. Turns out I was in Switzerland all along. I called the HR team to try and make sense of this, and the number D gave me to contact during my suspension was wrong. I call S. He assures me things will be investigated, invites me back to store the best week to address what I've been accused of. So I have a week, and in this week, I pick apart everything in the script from our meeting, from D lying about days I worked to lying about days he worked. Said he was in the store the same day I had to call him and tell him his new phone arrived, refusing to show me evidence and much more. Rather than come in response to the accusations, I make it perfectly clear to D and S I won't be able to respond until I see the CCTV from the dates. D's face turned white as he scrambles to try and find the CCTV. Mysteriously, he's no longer shown me something from the dates I asked, but a month earlier. I know there won't be anything, so I watch, and after a few minutes I ask what I'm meant to be seeing. I SHU not after 30 minutes in there rewatching myself and D leave the security room, and the only thing he's shown me is my colleague accidentally handing a traded-in phone back to a customer, and that's it. At this point I'm curious, because it's clear D hasn't watched the CCTV, didn't check the rotas, didn't check his own schedule, and as such has fabricated everything. I'm livid and tell S WTF. He drops the investigation and offers to give me an additional week paid suspension as an apology. I can't stand the idea of going back from my suspension, only to have to work with D and C again. I take sick leave, but come payday there's nothing there. I call HR, and D and S have never placed me on suspension. I launch a grievance against D, making it clear I can't work for someone who's been so malicious without any cause. I don't feel safe working for him. Because of the sheer volume of balls ups, D makes this go to my regional manager head, M. M already has issues with D, and loves the fact that he's now got something to use against him. I spent 3 hours with M, made 26 pages of notes, popped into my old store during the fiasco. No one knew where D had gone, as it was being internally investigated. As I understand it, he's writing me a letter, has to go and retrain. I may have told S that should he have D write me a letter, retrain and explain to all my old colleagues what happened, I'd go back. Didn't say it would be for longer than the day. The last story is, constantly harass me over minor things? Let's see what the boss thinks about you bashing customers over social media constantly. I work at a grocery store. I do my job, and I do it well. I'm known as the person everyone can count on, and I'm well liked and respected. My coworker has worked there longer than me. She went to college and considers herself better and smarter than everyone else. She constantly acts like she's the boss of the place, and is always telling me what to do, and making up rules that aren't needed. If anyone makes any kind of mistake, she makes a huge deal about it. She has to go around and tell every single person. If someone messes up something in production, she brings it around and shows it to everyone. She also constantly complains about the way people do things, even things that aren't relevant to her job at all. For example, at night the closers have to go and get packaging that we use to package what we make. I tend to wait until something is actually getting low, and grab a whole box of the item from the supplies area in the back of the store, rather than grabbing a tiny bit of everything every night, because I think it wastes time. To most people it doesn't matter what way you do it, because either way it gets done. Not this girl. She constantly complains about me doing it this way, and says that I never fill the packaging, and I don't do anything but sit around when I close. She constantly goes to the managers about this issue, and they ignore her because it doesn't matter. So she complains loudly and often about how our managers are idiots who don't know how to run anything. She does SH like this constantly. I used to just ignore her, but I finally snapped. I came in the other day and she had gone around telling everyone and all the managers that I hadn't pulled the icing out of the fridge the night before, so it would be soft for decorating cakes in the morning. She gave me a lecture when I walked in and informed her that yes, I did. I pulled several buckets. She then responded, "Oops, I thought you didn't. I didn't know the date yesterday." So we had plenty of icing for the cake, but she was going to yell at me anyways because in her eyes I should have pulled more anyways. She'd also already gone around telling the managers and my coworkers that I didn't do it, and didn't bother to apologize or correct herself to anyone, making me look bad. I was done. This happens so often. So done, I proceeded to go on Facebook and print out every instance of her insulting a customer on Facebook for the last few months. This was easy because she never shuts up and posts long angry tirades often. When I was done, I had 10 different posts that were at least a paragraph long. Her page is completely public, so anyone can see these. In the posts, she called customers various things. Disgusting pigs because when she was eating lunch, she could hear someone chewing next to her, that she wished she could slap the F out of them. Idiots had terrible taste, mocked a black customer's name along with a picture of her cake, called a customer a crazy bee, and called our shoppers lazy fat A's because there was a loose shopping cart in the parking lot. So I gave it to my manager who's taking it straight to HR today. Our company takes this kind of thing extremely seriously, since we're all about customer service. Then it really seemed like nothing happened and I was pretty bummed, but then my coworker who hates her way more than I do, gleefully told me otherwise. So right after the event, she took a vacation to Texas. This vacation was really sudden, considering we require 3 weeks notice for vacation. She also talks constantly, so we hear about all of her plans months ahead of time. This one she didn't talk about at all. I found out the reason for her sudden vacation was that she was suspended for a little over a week, but used the excuse of a vacation to cover it up, and visited some friends of the family. She didn't tell a soul. I guess she was really embarrassed, but my coworker who hates her is very good friends with one of the higher up managers and found out. She doesn't suspect me at all because I'm such a sweet person outwardly, even to her. She's actually been even nicer to me lately than ever, and even ran up and glomped the hell out of me at work the other day out of nowhere. So maybe she learned her lesson? I hope you enjoyed those stories. Don't forget to subscribe.